So people just assume, oh, you don't speak my language. You're not very intelligent. You're not very bright. And the seeds of depression, anxiety, fear set in. And, I left from the United States to go live in Brazil for a few years. And I can relate.
When we talk about immigrants and numbers, we stop seeing people. But when we put faces to the stories, we can finally feel.
Alexander, you wanted to tell your story on my podcast. I don't know much about your story. You were recommended by Douglas, sitting next to you. Let's start with that. My first question, why do you want to tell the story?
So I want to start off by saying what you're doing is really important. Douglas put me onto your channel. I watched you interview him, and I thought this needs to be out to everybody, especially right now with what's going on, not just in the United States of America, but throughout the whole world. There's a lot of contention that I feel like is happening, and it's because we're not communicating enough of people's stories and what their experiences are going from one country to another. And so I felt very impressed by what you guys are doing, and I wanted to share my experience because from what I see is a lot of immigrants from other countries coming to America and their stories and what they're dealing with. And when I was younger, when I was 19, I left from the United States to go live in Brazil for a few years. And I can relate to what I've heard on your channel, what other people have gone through. And I felt impressed to come on and just share someone who was born here in America, our thoughts, or at least my thoughts on the struggles, and just let everyone out there know that you're not alone. And it's not necessarily just a culture-based thing. Every person, regardless of where you're from, if you go from one place to another, you will experience something different.
Yeah, and I like his perspective, where like, hey, it's an American that lives here in America. He has a big community of immigrants friend. Plus, he went and lived in Brazil, and he was an immigrant himself there.
Why did you go to Brazil, Alex?
So the first time I went to Brazil was to serve an LDS mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It was actually Douglas who was really my first friend. He was the person who trained me on that mission, and we've been friends ever since. So more than 20 years, our friendship has endured, and it all started because we came together at a certain point in the world. And I think that's how everyone's story is. When you travel and you meet new people, there are incredible friendships that can last a lifetime, regardless of a culture, regardless of language, regardless of beliefs
Or visa status.
or visa status.
Right.
But this is a message that I want everyone in the world to hear, and that is that you can have a completely different origin story and still come together and have an incredible friendship.
Right. There's two things I wanna say. First, you cannot say what are the motives why you wanted to be on the show. And I appreciate, that you saying that you like what I'm doing, and I appreciate you coming on board and saying how you feel about this stuff and how immigration. But I interview a guy from Denmark. He's a documentarist, and he crossed the jungle from he has a name, the Daring Jungle. I don't know what it's called, from Venezuela to the U.S. So he recorded himself as a documentarist walking with the immigrants, and he say something that resonate with me, that stuck with me. When you remove labels, right, you see people.
Wow,
And
that's so true. That's so true.
and that really hit me because, you as an American, you went to Brazil and you were in Brazil, and regardless of political or legal status, they're people, culture, languages, right? And you share the experience in Brazil, and now you want to share with people, which is great. But that's something that is, I wanted to say, to reinforce what you're saying, because I believe what you believe. If you remove the label, what you see is people, and that's all it matters at the end of the day.
I feel like that we, as a culture, we judge so quick, like, the first impression, but we rarely give a second chance to people around us. Like, for myself, I slapped myself on the face so many times because of that. As I'm meeting someone, I'm like, oh, because the way that person looks or the way he spoke, I'm disconsidered, to later find out that that person was amazing person, someone that accomplished so many things in life. And I was like, wow, I should not have judged that person, should not have labeled that person, and look at that person. And if we never burn bridges, that one person one day, life will go around, and that person's gonna be right there to help you.
Right. Well said, Douglas. So, Alex, why you don't introduce yourself? Who's Alex, right? Who was Alex then when you went to Brazil? Who's Alex today?
So when I went to Brazil, I was young. I was 19, very naive. I had no idea who
Naive and dumb.
Yeah. I didn't know who I was, and I didn't know what my weaknesses were. And when you move from something that you've grown up in and you're put into a situation where you don't know anything, you get to know all of your weaknesses really fast. And for some people, it's not even what others are doing to you, it's what you're doing to yourself. Because now you're facing your own weaknesses in an environment that you don't know. And there's some people who recognize that, oh, this is my weakness. I need to work on it. But there are so many people that get caught up in thinking it's you, this other person, it's the people, these new people that I'm around. They're judging me. They're making me feel bad. And when you take that approach, you're setting yourself up for a lifetime of disappointment, a lifetime of feeling judged, and you're never really going to overcome your own weaknesses.
So, give me an example of weakness. What would you call a weakness? Judging people is one, right? But I think we all judge, right? We all judge, if you buy a car, you're going to judge the car to see, does the car good pain? It's not good pain. Is the motor working? So we judge in some ways. Well, what is a weakness for you?
Yeah, so what happened to me, and I think this is relatable to anyone that goes somewhere and has to learn a new language. When you're first learning a new language, everyone seems to assume that you're not very intelligent, right? That somehow you're not as smart as they are because you're prohibited by your language. You have that language
Right.
barrier.
You're limited.
Yeah, very limited. And so when I first arrived in Brazil and I'm trying to communicate with people, it seemed like everyone wanted to just dismiss me. They would blow right past me and try to find somebody else to talk to. They wouldn't really talk to me. And that's hard because, there's an old saying, if you treat or if you judge a fish by its ability to climb trees, the fish is going to feel like it's stupid.
Right.
So people just assume, oh, you don't speak my language, you're not very intelligent, you're not very bright. And most of us will reflect and say, you know what, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not that intelligent. And that's when, the seeds of depression, anxiety, fear set in. And although I'm not an immigrant, and I'm not an immigrant today, I don't live in another country, I see this all the time. I see a lot of people, good people, that come from a worse situation, trying to better and improve their lives, only to be met with their weaknesses, and then to see everyone treat them as if those weaknesses are who they are.
It takes a lot of balls for someone to leave their country, leave their community, their culture, fly over to another country, or even walk over to another country and start life all over again. Sometimes they come with family, kids. It's like take my head for it, because it's a lot. It takes a lot
Right.
to
It's not just starting all over. You're actually competing against people who are established. You come to a new country and you're starting from nothing, but everyone else has history. They have generations before them, and you're starting from nothing. So now you have to compete for jobs or income. It's a very difficult thing. And I love what Douglas said, because I was thinking that on my drive over here. I was thinking, honestly, it's probably one of the most difficult things that regular human beings can do, and that is to start all over in a completely strange place. My hats off to everyone who does it.
Right. It's an advantage that you did your mission in Brazil, and most LDS people do that. That's give you an ability to learn and understand what it is to be abroad, away from your family. More likely those that are out of the country, right? Even if you live in Utah and you serve your mission in Florida, you migrate into another state. There's internal migration and external migration.
Well, let's be
So
honest.
your internal,
Florida is another country.
it is. So they say it's Texas, but I don't know. But once you move in within your country limits, right, inside your country to different states, you migrate and you find different cultures, and go to Texas, go to Louisiana, where I am right now, go to Florida. North Florida, South Florida, two different cultures. So there's internal migration and external migration. But external migration, where you have a complete different culture, complete different language, is more challenging, and that gives you the ability to see what other people go through. So that said, explain people what is a mission, because you talk about the church, you talk about the mission, and what is the mission for what is that for LDS people, so people can understand, and why you have to serve your mission in Brazil.
Yeah, so Douglas and I are both members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and for young men especially, but young women as well, if they choose, it's completely up to them. They don't have to go and serve a mission, but if they choose, if they want to, they can request to go out on a mission and preach the gospel, preach what the church teaches. And what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints teaches is Jesus Christ and what Jesus Christ does. I didn't choose where I got to go. When I submit my papers to go into a mission, someone else does that. And then I get my calling and it says, hey, this is where you've been assigned. And I remember receiving my call, and I saw that I was going to Brazil, and I was excited. I mean, I'd never left the country before in my life.
Right.
And here I was, a 19-year-old kid about to leave home and go into a new country, and I knew nothing about it. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what to expect. I mean, here
Right.
I thought I was going to be like Indiana Jones and be cutting down like through the jungle and everything like that.
Right.
But so it was a new experience for me, and definitely eye-opening and intimidating.
Was there a lot of jungle?
Yeah. In some places where we went, it was more like Texas of Brazil. There's
Right.
cows and fields.
I believe you. So, what was the hardest part that you experienced arriving in Brazil? Because, like he said, Douglas say, takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of balls to migrate to another country. It's funny because you migrated for 2 years, or what they call today an expat, or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. So now labels are sensitive. They're sensitive right now because immigrants don't like the word expat. If you go to a country for whatever time, you're an immigrant, whether short term, long term. But some, people, they go for a different purpose, like you, or they're just gonna work there for a little bit. They call themselves expat. So I don't know where the church mission, what category it fits, but it's still some sort of migration. So
Yeah, I
what
mean,
was the harder thing? Yeah,
with the mission, I mean, you're going to another place, but with the understanding that you're only going to be there for 2 and sometimes 3 years. It's a limited time. It's not always expected that you're going to be there forever. So that's probably the biggest difference, is that you're not
Right.
actually going down there to start your whole life all over again. But that
Right.
doesn't change how you're received, and it doesn't change how you feel, right?
Right.
It's still the same thing. You're still going to a new country and you're still speaking a new language, and it's very difficult, and people are going to be quick to judge, and you have to be able to deal with that.
Right.
It takes thick skin to be able to make that change.
Right.
But that's a good thing. And the reason why it's a good thing is because you grow, right? You grow as a person, you grow in your character, you grow in your ambitions, you grow in every single way, because you have to be creative, you have to adapt.
Right.
And every person I know, and I know a lot of people who have immigrated here, not just from Brazil, but from Mexico, from Honduras, from Russia, from Ukraine, from Czech. Every single one of them are industrious. They work so hard, harder than anyone I know that was born here.
Right.
And I think very interesting because people that are out of their comfort zone, those are the one that want to progress more. If we stay where we are, we gotta always be there.
Right. So, what was the harder thing that you experienced in Brazil?
So the hardest thing was definitely the language was a problem. I was explaining to Douglas that when I first got there, there was some miscommunications. I didn't know what was going on. And so
Right.
I reacted in a certain way, and that caused some problems for some people. And then they blamed me for those problems when I didn't really know what was even going on. And for the next year while I was there, there was a lot of people that didn't like me because they didn't understand me and I didn't understand them. And so for me, finding friends, finding a community, finding people that I could trust, that was difficult.
And I can testify that his Portuguese is great after 20 years. We went to
That's good.
Brazil for like 2 months for like an adventure, and we had a fantastic time. His Portuguese was very sharp, so he's still keeping up.
That's good. That's good. Not many people accomplish that, especially in 2 3 years. It takes a long time to learn another language. a long time.
Oh, by the way, he speaks Russian too.
Well, I'm learning.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
I'm
Okay.
learning Russian. I love Russian music. I love other cultures, right? I just love
Right.
cultures. It stems from my time in Brazil, getting to
Yeah.
know new people, getting to see how they live and what's important to them. And what I
Right.
have learned about kind of the Brazilian, well, Hispanic cultures and stuff is they're very family
Right.
oriented. They're fun. They're
Right.
loud. They're energetic.
Yeah.
It's exciting. It's exciting. And I think Douglas said it when you were interviewing him. Speaking another language is like experiencing a whole new world, right? And so I learned Portuguese. I love Portuguese. I always say that Portuguese is the language of angels, you know? I love it.
Right. Right.
And because of my experiences and the friendships and everything I have from that, I now want to learn other languages because there's a whole other world out there.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah. Once you get a little taste of the outside world out of the U.S., if you like it, you can't stop. You want to learn more and see more. I had that experience to travel and see other places inside the U.S., outside of the U.S., going back to Argentina, where I am from, and see Argentina. I've never been to Brazil, but I'm going to go. I was at the airport one time. They didn't let me stay. So, funny enough, I don't want to tell the whole story. I want to be quick with this, but I traveled with the American passport, and I had my Argentinian passport expire, but I wanted to renew it in Argentina. So when I got to Brazil, I gave them my American passport. They said, "Well, you need visas to come to Brazil." I'm like, I didn't
Oh,
know.
yeah.
So I had to stay at the airport 24 hours until my
Mm.
next flight because I had a hotel to stay there for a day, and that
Oh,
was my chance. But anyways, I will go to Brazil someday. But
You can go with
yeah,
us.
once you,
yeah.
You can go with us.
We're
oh
planning
yeah,
to go to
absolutely.
Brazil.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. It makes it easy when you go with someone that knows and understands the culture, right? But going back to Brazil, right? I'm assuming that, the food initially was a struggle, right? Or maybe not. Maybe, people sometimes, especially like Brazil or Argentina, as you say, they're family oriented. So a lot of more, try to get to know you more. They're more talkative, they're more social, right? And sometimes Americans are not that social, right? They're social on their own way, but you know, that could be an impact too, right?
Yeah.
Was that
I
something
mean,
that affect you at all, or it was easy to, blend into the culture?
I'm a pretty, outgoing, talkative guy. I'm not afraid to talk to about anybody. So for me, it was easy to get there and talk, but I didn't really know what I was saying. There was a lot that I had to learn and understand how to be polite in a new culture, what is respectable, what's not. Same things that anybody would go through when they're going to a new country, for
Right.
sure.
So yeah, I interviewed this woman from she's American. She lived in France for probably about 10 years. And French people are very social. And she said, as an American, I'm used to hanging out 2 hours, maybe three the most. Then I'm going home, right? But in France, it was like 10 hours, 14 hours getting, just talking and guidance. Like, it was overwhelming for her, but at the same time, they're very social with their own people, not with people that outside of the culture. So there
Uh,
were two
we
struggles that
see.
she had, right? So, but I know in Argentina and Brazil is very different. I don't think they're social just to their own culture. And I can speak for Argentina. We don't care. We just want to be friends with anybody, right? But the French people are more to their own. I don't know how Brazil is, but I'm assuming Brazil is wants to be friends with anybody too.
Yes, we
In my
like,
opinion.
yeah, it's like any culture, we just like, we're interested to find out, you know. I
Right,
remember there was
right,
this kid in my high school that he came from Angola, and like, yeah, we like, where is this place? We want to get to know that kid, you know. So yeah,
right, right. So yeah, going back to your trip to Brazil and all that. So you come back. You stay there 2 years. You say 2 years,
Yeah, I lived there for 2 years.
right? So when you came back to the U.S., how was that like? Right? Was that Did you suffer that reverse culture that most people suffer? Like it happened
Yeah,
to us when we stayed in U.S. for too long, and then we go back to Argentina or Brazil, right?
well, I fell in love with so many things in Brazil that I started missing just the little things there. I would miss like the food. I would miss some of the music. I would miss my friends, the people that I started to create relationships with. And of course, when I first went there and came back, that was just barely when social media was kicking
Right,
off. Like I didn't have a Facebook account until after I came back. So it was hard for me to get back in touch with people. And that was hard as well. is now I'm being torn away from all of these new friends that I had.
Right.
And I regret not doing a better job keeping phone numbers, addresses, and names like in a book or something like that. I regret not keeping a better track of it because it was almost impossible to stay in touch. So
Right.
that was
So you say you keep going back to Brazil occasionally, right?
yeah. So I went last year. I went a year ago. We went in. We both went last year, and then in 23 I went by myself, and then we went for another month and a half, 2 months in
22,
2022.
yeah.
So yeah, I've been back a few times. Every time is just incredible, but it changes. That's the problem too. Is like when you
Right.
leave a country for even a few years, when you come back, it's a completely different place. And the
Yeah.
people that you left behind, they're different. When I left, my nephew was just a tiny little guy, and then when I come
Uh,
back, he's like full grown, and he's like,
right.
"Who are you?" We were
Right.
best friends, and then I come back, he's like, "I've already got my whole life figured out."
Right. Yeah. When you migrate, man, it's you know what you experience. We all do. Douglas probably. I don't know when he went back to Brazil for the first time, but for me, I went back almost 10 years later, right? And it was just because of my financial situation. I struggled. And to buy a ticket, go there was expensive. Leaving my job was expensive. I couldn't just go back to Argentina. And when I was finally able to, if I was financially capable to go back, man, it was, it was 10 years that I missed. It was like, I feel like like I woke up from a coma. That's what I felt
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Like I went back. It's like, wait, there used to be something here that's not there anymore. And then now the people that were your age, they used to frequent those roads. Now their sons or daughters are on the, younger generations out on the street or where you grew up, not the people you left, because the image you have is the last image you
Yeah.
will you remember.
See, and
And
that's
I migrated in the 90s where we didn't have the social media that we have today. So now
That's
you
that's
can,
one thing
you know,
I really wish that people here in America would understand. So people who haven't gone and lived in another country, I wish they would understand what people leave behind to come here or anywhere. So often we just assume that they're here for nefarious reasons. They're here to do something wrong. That's why they're here. They're
right,
greedy or they're here. No, I remember when Douglas became a citizen. Douglas invited me to come down to the courthouse. And I
right,
didn't know what to expect. I thought I was just going to go there. It would be Douglas and a few of his friends, and they would
right.
say, "Here you go. You're a citizen. Congratulations." And we'd take a few
It's
pictures
a
and leave. No,
ceremony. There's a
yeah.
ceremony.
When
Yeah,
when I got there, there were
It's
boys,
like
at
200.
least 100 people there. Maybe closer to 200 people there
yeah,
that were all becoming citizens. And the most remarkable thing was that they allowed anyone from that group to take some time and tell their story to the rest of us. And I'm just sitting there, and there were people from all over the world, and they got up and they said, I come from the Middle East. It's a war torn area. There's always guns, bombs. Like people are always running for their lives, and we're just so grateful to be here. And
right,
many of them started crying, and that's
right,
what I want the rest of America to see, because the narrative has been pushed for so long that immigrants are bad, and
right,
that's not true.
right,
Most people who come here from somewhere else are coming here because they want to improve their life. They're not here to cause problems. They're here to create solutions.
right,
And it's an interesting thing. You get people that are like, well, they're here to steal all of our resources. They're taking
right,
precious resources. Well, that's actually not true, because when you come here, I mean, when you're undocumented, you're not taking any of the social benefits. You're not getting Social Security. You're not getting food stamps a lot of the time. You're not getting anything,
right,
but yet you're still working and you're still providing. So you become a net positive person, meaning the country is giving you nothing in return for your labor here.
And you still gotta
right,
pay taxes.
And you're still paying taxes and you're still providing, and so you become a net positive person. Whereas so many American citizens, they on food stamps, they're receiving Social Security, they are a net negative person for the country and for the economy, and you don't see that in immigrants.
right,
So as a whole, immigrants are a very positive and necessary part of our economy. I don't know why we're spinning it, why we keep
right,
continuing this narrative that just because you're from another country, you're somehow bad. I don't get it.
right. You know what I think? Here's what I think. I hear you, and I agree with you. The problem that we're having, I think when we talk about immigration, we need to separate certain things. One is legalization of an immigrant, the process, and political interests, right? So people will use immigration to motivate people to vote, right?
Yep.
That's what they're going to do. So most people that don't understand immigration and they struggled in their life, they got life struggles. If they see me driving a brand new truck and you're driving a 1990 Honda, you're gonna blame the system that you're driving a Honda and because I'm an immigrant, I'm stealing from Americans and driving a brand new truck. So the depends who's in charge in the government is gonna leverage on that, right? To get votes, right? And right and left, they do the same. In different ways, they leverage on immigration to get votes, right? The other day, one person accused me to promoting immigration. And it wasn't from the US, it was actually from Argentina, because immigrants are all over the world. The immigrants is not just the US, immigrants are in all over Europe and all over the Americans. There's immigrants. I interview people that live in migrate to Guatemala, migrate to Mexico, Argentina, migrate to Brazil. People migrate and move all over the world. Some places have more migration than others, right? Like the US or, England or Spain. But, there is bad immigration and good immigration, right? But you have to look at percentage. So evidently Douglas is a great example of good immigration. I believe that I am too, because I'm paying my taxes. I never done anything bad. I don't commit any crime. But unfortunately, because of the bad propaganda that politicians use, right? Some people see all immigrants as bad. They're all criminal. I flew here legally. I came here with a business. I bought a business in Florida when I moved here. So I'm a fortunate immigrant. I never had to cross the jungle or anything like that. And I understand that, some people migrate and cross illegal for necessity. And from a human perspective, I understand that. From a legal part, it's still illegal and it's still a crime, right? Now, from the human side, I can say, well, I'm a human. I understand. I want to help this brother, right? But it's important that we separate what we're talking about, right? Because that's the problem right now. The TV, I was accused of promoting immigration. I'm not promoting immigration. I'm showing people the stories that actually you make you be on this show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? I'm promoting his story. Douglas' story is great. I saw Douglas. I've never been a close friend to Douglas. I met him when I was divorced. I was single. He was divorced at the same time. He was single. And I was always impressed by his life, the way he lives his life, excitement and doing crazy stuff. And I was always like, look at this guy, what he's doing. He's an immigrant, never done anything wrong. But unfortunately, labels and politicians make things the way they are right now. So, but we cannot forget that illegal immigration is wrong, right? But why people make that decision? Why someone decides to? Some people die in the jungle trying to come to the U.S. What makes someone make that decision? And you say, Douglas, the other day something that resonated with me. When we complain about something as immigrant, basically complaining about a choice that we make, and that's the reality. So you made a choice to leave your country, right? Let's say you leave Venezuela, and you die along the way because you got killed by thugs, or you die of a disease, you get bit by a snake, or killed by an animal. Whose fault is that, right? I mean, it did not make it to the U.S. yet. It's not in the U.S. It died before they got here. So we all made choices, but it's important that we understand those things. We have to understand. We have to understand the whole concept. There's a choice. There's countries that you welcome, countries that you not welcome. From a humanitarian side, like I see things, I'm interested in the story of the humanitarian side, the story, why people do what they do. But in some cases, like I said, being illegal is wrong, but some people have no choice. But at the end of the day, is that person really a criminal, right? Probably not.
Well, and
Right?
let's not
From the
forget
humanitarian side.
let's not forget that the majority of, and I don't like really throwing around the term illegal immigrant, because a lot of people come here legally and then something expires or a law changes.
Yeah.
So while they're here legally, something beyond their control changes, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, then they're illegal. And
Right.
let's not forget that the system is very complex, very difficult.
Absolutely.
It's not just going down to the DMV and filling out one paper, turning it in and paying
20 bucks.
$20. That's not
Right.
it, it's far more complex than that. And there's
Right.
history behind all of it.
Right.
And I think there's too many people out there that assume that everyone who's an immigrant was climbing over fences and sneaking at night, and that's
Right.
just not that's not the norm. Yes,
Right.
there are those cases. They're the ones that you're talking about. People who are fleeing
Right.
very tragic situations. But they're not
Right.
fleeing tragic situations to then create tragic situations. That wouldn't make
Right.
sense. And
Right.
most criminals, they love chaos. They would stay where the chaos is because that's where they can find opportunity to commit their crimes. The people who are
Absolutely.
fleeing those things, they're doing it so that they can have a peaceful life. And many studies have shown that immigrants are far less likely to commit violent crimes than US citizens.
Right.
So I don't know.
I agree with him. I feel like uh, we gotta get to know the people that
Yes.
is around us. As exactly what you're doing is sharing the stories. Like when
Right.
we get to know the person that is like I'm saying, like as an American, and I'm seeing an immigrant, and I get to know that person, like my walls comes down. There's a time for a relationship, for friendship and such. But you gotta stop that judgment and just let that knowledge, that the acquaintance with the other person be within you.
Right. That's why I brought that up, because what Alexander that you saying is very accurate. But people don't understand all these little concepts about immigration, all these little things that happen, right? There's different components to immigration. One is the system, the process is not good, it's expensive, right? So if you apply for a green card, you can only make 2 mistakes on the paperwork. So either you make the application yourself or you pay an attorney to do it, right? There's no guarantee that you're gonna get it. And even if you pay the money, you might not get your green card. But the worst part of that, the immigration system does not have any good communication tools. So when you apply for any paperwork with immigration, you don't know anything until maybe 2 years. 2 years later, they tell you, "Oh, you're denied." And now what, right? And if you call, they don't give you an explanation. There's no
Yeah,
explanation. I don't know. I don't know why. It almost feel like am I being? It almost feel like a secret, I don't know, investigation,
set
because
up
they don't
here.
give you, we cannot give you any information. I'm sorry, bye. It's terrible and expensive. But then you have politicians, right, that promote on the other side, right, to win votes. And then most immigrants that want to do well and they're illegal, they hiding. They're not collecting illegal taxes. They're not stealing. They're just doing everything cash because that's all they can do and leave, hitting as much as possible, right? They are under the radar. The criminals not gonna do that. They're just gonna be shooting at people, doing bad things. Those never came here with good intentions.
Yeah.
Normal immigrants, legal or illegal. The legals, there's no issue. But the illegals, the ones that really want to work and make money or build a house back at home, whatever they're doing, they're not exposing themselves. They're not getting attention. But look, it's a great topic. I usually don't talk much about politics and stuff like that because people immediately think like, I'm doing politics. I'm not doing that,
Well,
but
they
I
want
think
they
it's
want to they
valid.
want to say that you have an agenda,
Right,
that you have
right,
some nefarious agenda,
right,
which you don't. You're here trying to inspire people who are
right,
already in the middle of these things. It is not an easy thing. We've already talked about it. It's not easy.
right,
And you have to have a community. You have to have support, and you have to know that there's other people out there that see you as someone who's good and
right,
give you an opportunity to go out and make friends. You talked about the people who are basically hiding. They're low key, they're sticking to
right,
themselves. They're the ones that just go to work, go home,
right,
right? They're not, and that's not really a good way to live either. And not only that, but when someone migrates and then they stick to themselves and they're not out showing the world who they really are, it leaves it
right,
open for misinterpretation. He's
right,
always by himself. He never talks to us. He just goes in his house and then he leaves and he comes back every once in a while. I
right,
don't know anything about him. He must be a bad guy.
right,
Well, it's going to take both sides. It's going to take people who are immigrating to branch out. Like Douglas he talks to everybody and
right,
everybody knows him. So everybody
right,
goes, "Oh yeah, Douglas, he's a great guy."
right,
So it feels like just what he's saying. Get a plant that and hides the plant from the sun, eventually that plant will die. So basically, if someone comes to this country with so much potential and every single door is closed, no matter how much they're trying to open the door, comes to a point that is just the person starts like doubting their ability. I have met doctors in other countries, nurses in other countries that come here and they can't progress because they don't accept the degree from outside.
Right,
And they end up like driving Uber or doing other jobs that is not of their career.
right,
And there's so much potential out there. It's just insane to me.
right. And another thing, I don't know if this happened to you, Douglas, but I'm also talkative and I socialize, and I have a degree in technology, so I compete with the Americans, right? That's where the less immigrants compete, right? So if you look at a percentage, people that compete at that territory, either a person that is black or Hispanic, is a very low percentage, right?
Yes.
The higher you go in career, the harder it is to the competition. And but immediately, when I'm talking to Americans, they're like, "Where are you from?" Because when you start talking and you start being open and social, naturally, you feel like you're like some other person. You don't put yourself down. Your level of confidence is a little bit higher. So the media is always that question right after, "Where are you from?" Right? Are you Italian? They immediately think you're from somewhere in Europe, not from Latin America. Right? Did that happen to you, Douglas? No, but that happened to me. Like, where are you from? Right? Just because I can talk, I'm not hitting, I'm not serving in a table. I'm talking. I can have a smart conversation, but I'm also, like you say, learning a language, give it the ability to learn a culture, learn about Americans, but American also learning about you. So now you can communicate. Oh, wait, he's might be from another country. He's probably not from Latin America. He talks a lot, like it's weird. I never knew why, but there's always that question. Where are you from? And I'm like, I know it's coming every time.
So
But
that's something that I'm actually really guilty of. I don't mean anything by it. Sometimes my girlfriend gets freaked out when
yeah,
because I'll stop people and I'll just be talking to them. I'll be like, "Where are you from?" And I do notice that there's a slight hesitation when I ask that. So tell me, like, when someone like that's born here asks you, "Where are you from?" Do you feel a little bit of anxiety at
no,
first, or you don't?
no. So let me tell you the two things about that. My experience was always about how I evolve or how I present myself in a conversation, what triggers where I am from. But there's some other American, that's where I am from without any context. They just ask you because they hear your accent, right?
Mhm. And
That doesn't,
that's me, and I'm one of them. I'm
that's not
sorry.
anxiety. That's not anxiety to me. But once you live in a country for so long, and this happened to every immigrant I interview so far in any country, it gets old. Like
Yeah.
every time you gotta explain where are you from. There's this guy, I interviewed this Venezuelan guy that was living in Argentina. And he had to go to psychology because he wanted to be Argentinian because he was tired of explaining people where he was from and talking about communism and why he left Venezuela. Same thing. Same thing, immigrant experience in the US, there is in Argentina or in any other countries. He was like, I just want to speak about Argentina because I was done. Every time I meet someone new, oh really? You from Venezuela? Why? Why Argentina? It gets old. Those things, you never feel like you belong there. Like you're always an outsider, right? And not even
Yeah.
that you had just playing the same story over and over every time. And it happened to me like not too long ago. This woman came to my office and the first thing is, oh, you have an accent. Where are you from? I'm from Argentina. When did you move here? Right? I just,
Like the
and I moved
interrogatory.
30 years ago, right? 35 years. It's like, it gets pretty old just playing that to people every time.
So when I go down to Brazil, people pick up that I have an accent. Thankfully, I don't really carry much of an American accent when I speak Portuguese.
Or the American look. He's not the blonde, blue eye guy.
Yeah, no, dark hair here.
Uh,
So, and I'm short. So most people don't assume that I'm from the United States, but they'll ask me where I'm from, and I'll admit it. I actually tell everybody I'm from Australia when I'm in Brazil. Because I think about it. no one has a problem with people from Australia. Nobody.
Right.
Or Canada.
Or Canada, right? Nobody has a problem. But if I'm in a different country and people are like, "Where are you from?" If I say, "Oh, I'm from the United States," they immediately think, "Oh, you're some rich dude. You're somebody I can rob or something." That's how I feel. But I don't know. So I just feel safer. I just say, "Oh, I'm from Australia."
Right.
And then they say, "Well, how do you speak Portuguese?" And so I came up with a story. And I
Right.
tell them, "Oh, my mom, she's a Brazilian. She met my dad. He's an
Right.
Australian. So I lived here when I was a kid, but then we moved to Australia." I have a whole story.
Right.
So I get it because it's like sometimes I don't really want to, like, if I know them, like if Douglas introduces me to somebody, in Brazil, then yeah, of course I'm gonna be, yeah, I'm from the United States. But if I'm out walking by myself, I'm just out by myself, and I'm talking to somebody, and they go, "Well, where are you from?" Then that story comes out. It's like, yeah, I'm from
No,
Australia.
that's very interesting because when he goes to Brazil and he goes on his own, he has shorts, a hat, and flip flops,
That's it.
and just walk on this and
Right.
talk to people just like as a normal Brazilian.
That's cool, man.
I went to Sao Paulo by myself, and I spent an entire day just riding the buses. The whole day, because it's like,
Right.
it's easy. You can look up on the phone. Oh, take this
Right.
bus, and it'll get you here. So I just doing that
Right.
the whole day, and I'd just sit there and talk to people on the bus. Then I'd get off, but nobody assumes anything because I'm just wearing flip flops, some really
Right.
crappy shorts, and a torn up shirt.
Right.
You don't even carry
Right.
money on me.
Right. But, I don't want to say that asking those questions is just an American thing. That's it happened to immigrants in other countries too. Locals ask those questions. They don't do it with any bad intention. I'm not saying everybody has good intention, but I say the majority does it not from a bad place. But it gets old. Just playing everybody
Yeah, I guess I can see
all
that
the
now. Yeah.
time, right? And
One thing that I experienced today at work, and also I experienced that a lot of times. That's at least my experiences is that when I start telling people about where I'm from, and they put their guards down, their walls down, and they become more, relaxed, more relatable, and we can chat.
yeah,
But there's that a little bit intense on the beginning, and then but afterwards it's just fine. Oh, okay, so we're good. And I think
right,
that's what I was telling before. Getting to know the person next to you, immigrant or not, it
right,
brings a different perspective in life. It's
right.
all about perspective.
Right, it's all about perspective, right? But at the end of the day, something you say really very true last time was it's a choice we made. So I made that choice 35 years ago, and it's not gonna be perfect. So I'm gonna have to deal with that for the rest of my life. People are gonna ask me, "Where are you from?" Even when I'm going on 34 years here, 10 years later, and when I'm 45 years in the US, someone's gonna ask me, "Where are you from?" Because I
Well,
can't hide my accent. My accent is there. I can't get rid of it. So I always gonna have that question.
It's an interesting thing to me because if you look at, influencers, big social media people, they're traveling all over the world. And that's how
Right,
a lot of people actually become famous is like, check out all the cool places I've been. Everyone loves to brag about exotic places,
right,
right? We as a culture here in America, and I assume in other places around the world, we love the idea of other places. Everyone does. It's like
right,
unknown world. It's exciting. You come back and you tell stories. I've been there. I've been to that place. And everyone
right,
around is like, "Oh, wow, you've been there? That's pretty cool.
right,
You must be a globetrotter." And
right,
so it's interesting that we think like that in such a positive way about outside the country traveling. But then when we meet people from those places, why do we turn it?
it's counterintuitive.
Yeah, it is. It's contradictory. Why do we
right,
turn it? But I think you said it. The majority of people, I think, just hear your accent, and I think they just want to know where you're from, mostly because they're interested, mostly because it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's fun, and maybe they've been there. Like for me, I ask people where they're from in hopes that they're going to say, "Oh, I'm from Brazil," and then I go, "Oh my gosh, where?" And then I start speaking to
right,
them in Portuguese
right,
and it's fun. And then I can make a friend, and sometimes I'm a little disappointed when they don't say Brazil, but I still think they're
right,
interesting. But I've never thought of it the way you said it. I've never thought it gets tired, it gets old. I've never thought of that. And I'm glad that you pointed that out because now I'm growing and maybe I won't be so intrusive next time. I don't know.
Well, I don't know if I don't know if it's right or wrong that you asking the question, right? It's what it is. I mean, I didn't say it with the meaning like, stop asking. But like Douglas said, it's a choice we made. And every person I met, I'm a new person to them. So they
Yes.
don't know my
Mhm.
story. They
You
know.
know,
So you can. So that's another reason why I have the show, because the show is about not only educating locals or the country that people migrate, but also educating immigrants. Because a lot of immigrants, not every immigrant has a good idea what an immigrant is, right? Being an immigrant to a new country doesn't make you. That's not your country, right? They're going to adopt you. Eventually, you're going to live like your parent, but that's not your place. And a lot of immigrants want to bring their country to the new country. That's not okay. It's okay when you keep it at home. You can never forget where you come from. Maintain your cultures at home, but respect the locals. Make it like you. Learn the culture. Show them your culture. Learn the language. So to me, it's about educating everybody, right? What is to be an immigrant? Right? Why someone is willing to die coming here? Why someone decided to go to South America instead of North America? Why people are fleeing to Europe? Why someone expected in a country that speak English, they had to speak Spanish? What make you think that's your land, right? For some people are today saying, well, we were here first. But, well, okay, so if you were Mexican, maybe yes. But if you're from Argentina, you were first in Argentina, not here. So you're going to fight for native Indians? Go fight in Argentina, not in the US. So there's a lot of misconception and how, in all angles, on the locals, on what politics can do, some immigrants, they need to be educated, right?
yes.
So I think maybe Mexican and American can go at it all day long. But if you come from Argentina and Brazil, you want to fight for indigenous right, go back to Argentina and do it over there. I mean, right? You want to fight
Yeah.
for your language, do it in Argentina because you're not Mexican. You were born in South America. So go fight for your rights over there. And now the Mexicans, they share land with the U.S. for a long time. They bought it from them. They bought it from them. The French sold Louisiana to the U.S. So there's a lot of mix of things. So they can go at it all day long. But, you have so many immigrants right now that join that conversation is that way. You're not part of that conversation. I'm trying to, from my perspective, not that I'm correct, but try to educate people. That's what my show is about.
But remember, the United States has a very different history because no one's from here. You have the Native Americans, but then everyone else at some point in time came here. But when you
Right.
had the colonies, you had the British colonies here, and work was hard. It was scarce. You had to work to survive. And then next thing you know, a whole bunch of Irishmen come over, and that
Right.
really was one of the original, racism,
Right.
bigotry, right? It wasn't just the color of people's skin; it was you're Irish.
Right.
My
Red
ancestors are from
hair.
England. You're Irish. We
Right.
don't want you here, right?
Yeah.
The Irish were hated just as much as anybody else, and they're white.
Yeah.
So people are just threatened because everyone who came here to America had to start from nothing, and everyone has grown up with that suspicion. And I think that's why a lot of, Anglo-Saxon families, I got Caucasian families are so reserved because they stay themselves because they grew up with trust issues or something because their ancestors were sketchy of everyone. So there's a history here that's just
Right.
really causing a lot of these problems, and we just need to kind of get over it. Like you said,
I, and I
education.
think and I think those people that were part of that history, whether Mexican, Spaniard, French, Irish, that came to North America, they have the right to conflict, argue, whatever they want to do. Eventually get over it.
Yeah.
But people that migrate from South America and Central America, they're not part of the history. So that's what I'm saying. Like, let the people in North America argue. So like Argentina has Spaniard, British, French, similar stories as the U.S., right? Brazil has Germans, they have Portugal, so they have their own story where they can argue between who was there
Yeah.
first in Brazil or Argentina. But what I noticed, like when typically they talk about Latin immigrants or Spanish immigrants, they only saying back like, no, you can let a Mexican argue with an American who was here first, right? Or Mexican was Spaniard because the Spaniard, but before the Spaniard got to Mexico, they were indigenous, right?
Mm.
They can argue all day long, but people that migrate from South America, Central America, they should go have that argument on their own country, right? That's kind of what, because when you look at right now, people complaining about this kind of stuff today. Everybody's complaining like, wait, you were not born in the U.S. or in Mexico. right? Or in Canada. Canada is right next to the US. There's a lot of
Hmm.
story between Canada and Mexico, right? I think you guys have the right to do that 100%. And who was here first? But also, that happened in Argentina was colonized. Brazil was colonized. What happened to the Indians in Brazil? Even today, they try to get rid of they want to go and find those Indians in the middle of the jungle where I think the government still protect them, but there's some people that never been in touch with civilization.
Exactly.
But every country has that, man. But anyways, I think it was a fun conversation. I enjoy it. Right. I don't think it was political at all. So thank you for wanting to enjoy your story here, for wanting to enjoy my podcast. Thank you for liking what I'm doing. That's good, man. Social media is not easy. It's a lot of work. So when someone like your stuff, say, man, your mission is great, motivates me. So I appreciate you guys for being on my podcast.
Yeah. Thank you for letting us be here. And again, I love what you're doing, and I love that you're getting people's stories out there, because that's really we need human stories, not politician stories, not
AI.
AI stories. We don't need big
Absolutely.
industry stories. We need human stories from people, from families, from individuals like you, Douglas, me, other people that you've had on your show, and just keep it up. I think that this will help someone somewhere at some time.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you all.